Welcome to Methodologies in Media Research. This is week 2 and it's the pre-recorded lecture, and this week we're going to be looking at cultural studies and semiotic analysis. So cultural studies is a very popular way of interrogating the media, and as I mentioned at the start of this course, we're looking at 3 main ways in which we can approach the analysis of media. For this, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at how cultural studies interrogates the media. We're then going to move on to more social scientific qualitative methods before finally turning to more quantitative methods at the end of the course. So cultural studies is a form of analysis that seeks to explore how culture is linked to systems of power. It explores the way in which culture supports and furthers unequal relationships within perceived genders, sexual orientations, ethnicities, social classes, generations, national formations and other systems. And what cultural studies does is it looks at culture, it looks at media texts, and it tries to unpick and find the ideological function within those texts. How do those texts serve larger political ideological functions? Now, because of this, cultural studies is explicitly political. It seeks to assist people in understanding the various ways in which power operates in our society, and it has within a progressive intention. It seeks to empower people to try and understand how this power works and how they can challenge it. Now, we're particularly interested in how cultural studies is applied to media texts and systems. Now, cultural studies methods differ slightly from the other kind of methods that we're going to consider on these courses. And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at qualitative methods and quantitative methods. And for these other 2 methods, a typical research paper will be structured in a certain way. And these 2 other methods draw their structure really from scientific literature. So in these other methods, typically you'd start with, say, an introduction which broaches the topic with the audience. There would then be a literature review which would explore the state of the art in the field. Then typically there'd be a methods section where they would explicitly lay out the methods they've used to arrive at the information contained in the article or chapter or paper or whatever it is. And that methods section articulates what the researcher did, how they did it, and how they arrived at their findings. There would then be other sort of like sections to it, typically a findings section and then an analysis section at the end. So these would be accounts of the theories, and there'd be how you would engage with the topic. So that's a non-cultural studies approach. Now, cultural studies has a slightly different way of equipping the reader with the same important information. So cultural studies research doesn't have that distinction between methods and theory as you saw in the social scientific approach, and there would be no divide between the theoretical overview, the literature review, the method and the analysis. And quite typically, say you're looking at a cultural studies book or a cultural studies thesis, the chapters would be not arranged to tell the reader what the author actually did, but to make an argument, and it'd stay through different sections of the argument. So the approach would look at themes and other clear sections dictated by the topic, and each would contain aspects of research and analysis, and they would be integrating the method along with the theory and the literature in the field. Now, a cultural studies specialist might even argue that dividing the topic up into a literature review, a methodology and the other sections is actually a bit of a false division, and that, you know, as researchers we never really work in that way. We constantly move around inside things. We constantly dip into the literature review and dip into the methods section, and then what we produce out of that is a more rounded overview. We never really sit down and systematically go through these stages. Other researchers would sort of like challenge that view and say, no, social scientific researchers do that. So the main point of me saying all this is, don't be surprised if you look at a more cultural studies approach and you find it laid out differently from a social scientific approach. Well, of course, there's a middle ground there. Some cultural studies approaches will have an introduction and then might talk about the methodological work before going into a more rigorous, theoretically informed approach. So there isn't really a clear line of how you do it in cultural studies. Now, cultural studies uses a range of different methodologies to try and derive information so it can subject it to analysis. On this course, we're really going to focus on two main approaches. So today I want to look at the idea of semiotics, and then next week we're going to look at ideology and discourse analysis in the field of critical discourse analysis. So semiotics is going to be the topic of most of this talk today. And we covered semiotics very briefly back in the first year, you may remember that. And the kind of basic ideas is, well, first off, semiotics is the study of signs. And signs are things that communicate meaning. There might be a word, there might be an image. Me here is a sign. It might be a piece of visual media, it could be a street sign, it could be an advert, it could be any kind of visual communication. It also includes words as well. Now, semiotics entails the idea that signs themselves relate to deeper meanings and ideas. And they argue that there is a social structure to life, that there's a structure out there, and that these signs relate to that structure. Now, although this seems a bit confusing at the start, as we go through this course and through the parallel course, Exploring Media Theory, you'll get the idea of structuralism. Now, so the role of semiotics is to consider how meaning is made and how a sign conveys meaning to people. So in cultural studies, we're interested in how the process of meaning making is often used to convey specific political ideas through signs. How is ideology communicated by signs? And that's what differentiates what we do in cultural studies from other forms of use of semiotics. And semiotics is used in a whole variety of disciplines. It's also used in the teaching of advertising. And we teach advertising students how to use semiotics to create texts. But here we're trying to unpack the visual meaning of signs using semiotics to do that. And we're doing it particularly to try and reveal to us the underlying ideological messages implicit within certain signs. So cultural studies uses semiotics to interrogate signs to understand how they further a particular position. Okay, so let's turn to some of the basic ideas of semiotic, what's implicit within it. And I'm afraid my image up, I wonder if I can move it down a bit. Let me see. Can I grab myself? Oh yeah, I can put myself down here. Let me put me down there. Okay, so let's go through some basic ideas. Firstly, one of the key ideas of semiotics is that language is constructed. There are very few words in any language that are onomatopoeic, that they sound like what they're trying to intimate. So an onomatopoeic word would be like bang or woof or meow. And there's very few words in English and in all languages that exactly sound like what they do. Words mean words because simply we agree that they do. We agree that a word means something between us, and therefore it allows us to have communication. So you need both a sender and receiver both to agree that the word means the same thing. The second key idea is that signs, the subjects of semiotics, comprised of three key elements. And over here on the sort of like right hand side of the screen I've got a little diagram. And so if you take the symbol of the heart, now the symbol of the heart there, this is a sign, all three together, and it's broken down into specific elements. So the signifier is the marks on the paper or the symbol on the screen or the sound of the word. It's the actual thing that you can communicate. The signified is the concept that communicates, and then the referent is the thing that it points to in the real world. So the signifier is the marks on the paper or sound of the word or pixels on the screen or whatever it is. The signified is the idea that they're seeking to communicate, and the referent is the thing out there in the real world. So that's the second idea. Third idea is that our reality is constructed by the words and signs that we use. So the way in which we think about something is constructed by the words we use. We can only think within a certain framework. Next week we're going to explore this idea in a little bit more detail and look at the concept of linguistic determinism, how our world is determined by our language. And finally, the fourth point of the basic stuff is that signs operate in systems, and a sign on its own means very little. It's only when you locate it and integrate it within a richer body of signs within a language itself, be that visual or spoken or written, only then did it make sense. If you just take one character from another language or one word from another language and you put it into your own language, it doesn't mean anything. But if you bring the whole concept and the whole language across, then you can understand it. So signs only work when you locate them within a broader framework of other signs. So let's turn now to how signs actually make meaning. And I want to look at two key strategies here: denotation and connotation. And they work at different levels. So denotation is the first primary strategy by which signs make meaning. It's basically about making meaning by association. A sign means something else simply because we link them together. So denotation comes from the Latin meaning to make a mark or to point at something, to denote something. So what we do is we agree to link certain signifiers with certain signified meanings. Those signifiers borrow their meaning from the originating concept. So it might be that a denotation could be referred to as the literal or dictionary meaning of a sign. So signified or concepts are denoted or linked to various signifiers. So if we turn back to our image of the heart, here, this pixelated shape, so like two circles linked together with a bit coming out the bottom with a dip in the top, we've come to associate that with the human heart. And we look at that and we all know pretty much, as long as we share the same culture and we agree that that concept means that refers to the human heart. The image, shape and its colour denote the organ, the heart. That's what we think it means. Now, strategy number 2 is called connotation. And while denotation allows us to make a direct link between a signifier and its referent, we often have other influences that modify the meaning of that signifier. For example, while the image of the heart may indicate the actual organ, that's pumping away in my chest, the image of the heart may, through association, become associated with other values. And in our culture, we associate this image here with romantic love. And the development of a second level meaning is known as connotation, because although it looks like a heart, because we've associated it through the whole Valentine's card industry, it's come to mean this. And if I send someone a picture of a heart, it doesn't mean I'm sending you a picture of an organ or something like that. It means I'm sending you love, because we associate that image with romantic love. Okay, at this point in the lecture, what I'd do, I'd split you up into small groups and get you to work through the following exercises. So you can do this wherever you are if you want to. So the idea is that work in pairs and identify the component parts for the following signs. So I would want to know what is the signifier, the signified, the referent, the connotative, also the denotative meaning and the connotative meaning of each of these 6 symbols. And this one down here, just to avoid any confusion, that's a child's drawing. But what does it mean? How is it communicating meaning? And so on. Let me move that so you can see this other symbol here. Oh no, look what happened there. Let me move this. Oh, there. That sign down there is actually the Extinction Rebellion meaning. The Extinction Rebellion sign. Okay, moving on slightly. Now, there are certain types of signs that over time become iconic signs. The French philosopher Roland Barthes argued that some connotations become so accepted and widespread that they become the primary association of the sign. And he referred to these as mythic or iconic signs. They reinforce and carry the weight of the dominant ideas and values of a culture in their sign. And they become very hard to question or to critically interrogate because it becomes so normal to us and so central to our understanding of the world that they're linked deeply into it. So in the UK, this symbol here is this piece of plastic and paper is the poppy, and it's come to symbolise through association with Remembrance Day the people who were killed in World War I. And over time it's also acquired slightly other issues as well, of feelings of loyalty, of patriotism as well. And here's a recent newspaper article where Jeremy Corbyn, who's the leader of the opposition in the UK at the moment, was wearing a small poppy for Armistice Day. You can just about see the poppy there. In fact, he was carrying a big wreath. Seems neither here nor there. But the fact is, the right-wing press were using this. So they were linking up the idea of the poppy to loyalty to one's country, to patriotism, to remembering the war dead. Now, we need to make two key points in relation to semiotics and recent developments, not recent, but developments that have occurred in the field. Firstly, I want to look at the idea of connotational codes and cultural difference. Where it appears is important. Secondly, I want to look at two forms of analysis, what I'm calling syntagmatic analysis, and I apologise for pronunciation, and paradigmatic analysis. Now, both of these are quite tricky terms at the start, but you'll get my meaning in a few moments. So, syntagms and paradigms, and the idea of difference. These refer to how signs make meaning through difference. And the meaning of a sign doesn't emerge from the thing itself. And as explored earlier, dog doesn't mean dog, because there's a link between the idea of dog and the writing of it. Sorry, dog mean... I got confused here. Let me go back. So I want to turn now to syntagms and paradigms in the idea of difference. These refer to how signs make meaning through difference. The meaning of a sign does not emerge from the thing itself. Okay, so dog doesn't mean dog because there is somehow a link between the idea of dog and the writing of dog. It's only our association. Rather, signs mean what they do because they exist in a system of meanings, and often because they do not mean anything else. That's a little bit of a weird thing. But if you think of the word dog, dog means dog because we've got other words for things that are like dogs but not dogs. So if I said to you, okay, tell me what a dog is, you might say something like, oh, it's an animal with, I don't know, something with 4 legs. Yeah, okay, you mean like that? No, it's alive. It's not something like that, it's actually alive. Are you like that? No, it's canine. Like that you mean? No, that's a wolf. And slowly we work out what dog means by working out what dog doesn't mean. So for us, a dog is a specific category of entity of an animal, and we know it's alive, and we know it isn't a cat kind of thing, and we know it isn't a big wolf, and we pare it down until we get the specific of what we mean by dog. So dog means dog because it doesn't mean other things. Signs achieve meaning through difference, through not meaning something else. Now that difference works in a number of different ways. It could be binary, that's perfectly acceptable. It's quite a common feature in Western culture, and lots of authors have argued that. But it also could occur in 2 other ways. There are 2 other dimensions by which signs can achieve meaning by being something else. So languages, for example, have rules about how we structure a sentence. So if you take this very simple phrase, very simple sentence, the cat sat on the mat. And we've got different words doing different things. So we've got the article, the, we've got the noun, cat, we've got a verb, sat, we've got a preposition, on, an article, the, and another noun, mat. Now we can logically, and to a degree, substitute other verbs and nouns for things. So we could change this for another noun, we could change this for another verb, and we could change this for another noun. We might even also have to change the article or the preposition. So let's have a look. So the sentence is composed of 2 types of word in a particular order. The cat sat on the mat. It's composed of types of word in a particular order. We could substitute other verbs in place of sat. So we could have the cat sat on the mat, the cat died on the mat, the cat ate on the mat. So it doesn't matter what verb we have there so much, as long as it fits into this category. So there's difference between these verbs, but exist in a specific order. Now, there is an order, the syntagm of various categories, the paradigms. So these are the different, this is a paradigmatic analysis, these are the different paradigms of words, and this is the syntagmatic analysis of the sentence. So lots of signification can be understood as forms of organisations in syntagms where the bits or components are organised into paradigms. So for example, you think of a Hollywood superhero, not a superhero, a Hollywood action movie film. So the hero figure films, they serve the same function in a narrative. To some degree, those heroes are interchangeable. You could substitute another hero. You could swap Steven Seagal for, I don't know who have we got here? Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Wesley Snipes. or Will Smith. You could change them over. We have a paradigm of hero figure who does certain things, and he's differentiated from other figures in the film. And it doesn't make a difference which hero fills the role as long as there is a hero in the film. I could give you another example. If you think of a meal, so think of a meal, the syntagmatic aspect of difference will be that we must have a starter, a main and a pudding. And we can substitute different starters, the various constituents of the starter paradigm. So you can have a starter, you can have a bit of fish, you've got something else here, you can have some mozzarella and some tomato there. And then you've got your main course, where you've got, what's this? I don't know what that is, that looks a bit weird. There's some meat over there, a bit of steak there. I think it's a crab actually sitting there. That's your main course, and you've got your desserts, your sweets. Now what you can't do is substitute a starter for a main, or dessert for a starter. They have to come in this order for the meal to make sense. We can substitute different starters, the various constituents of the starter paradigm, and desserts, but we can't serve a dessert as a starter or a starter as a dessert. A starter is different from a dessert by its order in the meal. So what I was going to do now in the lecture is we would look at this video several times, and I want you to start thinking about the key signs in it, and we'd start analysing this. If I move this thing up here, you can actually see the URL. I'm not going to play it in here because I don't have copyright to do that. But if you want to have a look at this video in your own time, you can. Let me see if I can go forwards. Okay, so what I would ask you to do is work through a simple methodology. Let me move me over to here. Oh dear, something wrong. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so an initial reading of the video, what I'd ask you to do is determine the key signs, the goals, and the simple meaning of that advert. What message is that advert trying to convey? And then I want you to start thinking about, are there any parallel messages here? How is the main story conveyed? Does it use other stories? Secondly, I'd like you to select 3 key signs from the video. Watch it through a few times and maybe take a few stills from there or a few short extracts and thinking about the signs that are in there. So those could be props, they could be in the advert, they could be characters, they could be various ways in which the camera is framed and so on. And for each sign, I want you to identify the signifier, the signified and the referent. What are they showing in that thing? What is it symbolising to you? Then what are the syntagmatic aspects of the advert? What order or narrative is going on in this advert? Now remember, sometimes narrative is very different from story. You've got to see the story there, but what is the underlying narrative of it? So you can think of films, you can think sometimes you can't get the narrative of the film until you've watched the whole story. Sometimes they align very nicely, but sometimes the narrative juxtaposes the story. Now, when you're watching this video, it's quite straightforward because adverts always try to convey quite simplistic meanings. They're not trying to confuse you or be clever. They want to get you over the idea. So the story is quite obvious in this one. So what is that story? And what are the paradigms in the syntagm and the narrative? Could we swap characters in there? What happens if we change the lead character to a woman? What if we changed the secondary character, the woman? What if we made her a man? What if we made them both men or both women? What if we made one significantly older than the other one? There's a relationship between the two characters. Sort of a romantic relationship, obviously, in the video. But what if we made that, say, a mother and father, or a mother and daughter, mother and son, or father and daughter? How would that change the advert? What alternatives would occur? What other meanings would come out of it? And then we can start looking back and saying, well, how is it making its meaning? How is it communicating this? By drawing upon these wider understandings of what is heterosexual relationships. So how is meaning made by the selection of the various components over others? Then I want you to start thinking about what myths are present in the video. What wider stories does it draw upon? What bigger narratives and ideas does it reinforce? And what ideological underlying ideas does the story draw upon or perpetuate? And how does the advert present relationships of people of different demographic groups? How does it use the different demographic groups to communicate meaning. And then I'd ask you to give some feedback on that, and we talk about that in class. So to conclude, cultural studies doesn't usually explicitly segment method from analysis, if you remember from the start. Semiotics is a key cultural studies research approach. Signs exist in context. We talked about the idea of denotation, which is the direct meaning and the literal meaning and the more associated meaning of connotation. We talked about the ideas of myths, and myths are connotations that have become so accepted and are so used they reinforce existing power relationships. Finally, we looked at syntagmatic analysis, which means to look at the narrative, and paradigmatic analysis means to look at the bits of the story. And in both, the choices made help the author or creator of the text to articulate the meaning. Well, I hope that's been of some use. Thank you very much.